Hello everyone. Today I'm going to sing a song composed sometime around the 14th century by Amir Khusro. My commentator is Amara Ali, who is writing a PhD dissertation on a style of Islamic poetry called the Marsiya. अरे सखी मोरे पिया घर आए, अरे सखी मोरे पिया घर आए, भाग लगे उस आंगन को, भाग लगे उस आंगन को, अपने पिया की मैं भले भले जाऊँ, अपने पिया की मैं भले भले जाऊँ। चरण लगायो निर्धन को, चरण लगायो निर्धन को, एरी सखी मोरे पिया घर आए। मैं तो खरी थी आस लगाए, मेहंदी कजरा मांग सजाए, देख सुरतिया अपने पिया की, देख सुरतिया अपने पिया की, हार गई मैं तन मन को, हार गई मैं तन मन को, एरी सखी मोरे पिया घर आए। जिसका पिया संग बीते सावन, उस दुल्हन की रैन सुहागन, जिस सावन में पिया घर नाही, जिस सावन में पिया घर नाही, आग लगे उस सावन को, आग लगे उस सावन को, एरी सखी मोरे पिया घर आए।
Hello, so today I will be sharing some of my comments on this beautiful poem by Amir Khusro, which is Eri Sakhi, which we just heard. And yeah, so I'll just share some of my reflections. So when I heard this poem, I had two main reactions, or you could say my understanding was guided by two main things. The first thing, which is directly linked to the experience of a poem, is how listening to it changes so much. What I mean is that when you read something in a book in winter, and then comes summer and you read it again, and it might make you feel different because of the season, but the text itself remains the same. It's the same poem in the same book, that it kind of stays static within the pages of the book. But when you listen to a poem, it has a very interesting effect. When we listen to Professor Barua's beautiful rendition, there is a kind of meaning that you can infer just from the listening process, rather than going into the intricacies of the language of why is this word used, why wasn't that word used, among other things. But when you're listening to it, when you're listening to the emphasis on certain words, when you're listening to the pauses, when you're listening to all the other aspects that make for a good recitation, there is a kind of effect that it has on you. For instance, even if you listen to other versions of the song, there is a kind of, they might use a sentence differently, might switch one word for another, because these texts like these or poems like these, except when they are enclosed in the pages of a book, are not very static in their performance. Singers usually add their own persona to these beautiful poems, and I think that is something that strikes you at first when you are listening to this poem. So there is a kind of ownership that the singer, reciter, takes over the poem. So you're not just listening to Amir Khusro saying something, but you're also listening to a version of Amir Khusro that's owned by the reciter or the singer, which I think is beautiful. The other thing that I wanted to speak about is the imagery of the poem. I wanted to speak about the imagery not in an attempt to kind of, maybe look at certain images and do a kind of deep dive into those images, but rather just looking at it on the surface. The imagery of the poem showcases a very beautiful aspect of devotion. It also shows us how varied devotion can be. So for instance, when we think of devotion, we can think of devotion as, revering the object of your devotion. The object can be a person, can be God, it can be something divine or whatever, but there is an element of reverence that can be present in some forms of devotion. But the devotion here is a kind of devotion that is very intimate, that's very close. So the devotee and the object of devotion seem to share something that kind of makes them a part of each other. What I mean by that is, for instance, we see in the beginning of the poem, we see the word ghar. So when we look at physical spaces here, we see the word ghar, we see the word angan. And when we look at these words, when we look at home or we look at the courtyard, they are very intimate spaces of the house. And if you're letting somebody into these spaces, is that you are seeking an intimate connection with these people. So you wouldn't let anybody come to the courtyard, to the angan of your house, or to your house itself. And I think that is very beautifully depicted in the poem. Even if you look at the overall sort of images in the poem, they are very bridal, and there is a kind of union that is sought, and those bridal imageries also highlight a very similar thing, a kind of closeness, a closeness that is present between spouses, for instance, is what is sought with the object of devotion. And another thing that I noticed was even the use of the word nirdhan, which symbolizes a kind of dependence, a kind of, I would say, a very high form of dependence. So if the devotee is so highly dependent on the object of their devotion, this shows a almost, a kind of codependent relationship where the object of devotion and the devotee kind of interlink, and in many ways they become the same thing. So because whatever the object of devotion, whether it's God, a human beloved, or whatever they however they want to do things is how the devotee wants to do things. So there is a kind of closeness that kind of enjoins their personas, which I find very interesting. Yeah, so these were the two main things that kind of stuck with me as I heard this beautiful rendition of the poem, the aspect of listening and how devotion cultivates a kind of closeness and intimacy, which I guess listening to it also does. So yeah, that's all. Thank you.